Welcome to the Mystical Power of Women, Evolutionary Women, Revolutionary Results. And I'm your host, Sherry Lynn. I invite you to sit back, to relax, and to open yourself up to the mystical, to the magical, and to the sacred conversation. Today's guest, Christy Droog, couldn't come at a better time. We're only 5 days away from Christmas, and many of us go into this time of year with a heavy heart. I know I do. My dad passed away 5 days before Christmas 9 years ago. Christy is no stranger to grief. She spent from the ages of 20 to 30 pretty much grieving the loss of loved ones, beginning with her young son, Gabriel. She lost him when he was about 2.5 years old to a tragic accident. And somehow Christy survived that, and she even was able to complete her nursing degree, only to find out that she was going to be nursing her own mother with her diagnosis with uterine cancer. Christy became her mother's advocate and caregiver for many years. In fact, after that, after losing her mom, Christy thought she was done with nursing, but life had another plan for her. And I'm really happy to say that, because as you find out, as Christy and I explore this conversation, Christy actually helps people with the transitioning, preparing to transition into our eternal form. So Christy, she spent many years grieving and trying to make sense out of life, trying to find the deeper meaning. And she was finally able to do that. She was able to connect with the soul family. She was able to explore the subtle energy field and to really be amazed by that and the mystical, magical energy. And I so agree too. This is something that Christy and I have very much in common, is that was my connection to the divine. And so Christy now is able to direct that energy into helping people with their healing. So not only does she help people prepare to transition, but she's helping people to really learn how to live and to embody the inner light that we are, and to remember the truth of who we are. So Christy, I'm so excited to see where our conversation goes. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me with you today. And yeah, I'm excited to be here with everybody else and sharing and sharing my experiences and hoping that your listeners will be able to find some resonance and maybe some of their own answers for their own journey.
I have no doubt that they will. And so one thing I am going to say to the viewers too is that I'm going to post the link to Christy's YouTube video that I watched that gave me so much information and just deep compassion for this human journey that we're all on. And that often does bring a lot of suffering and separation. And yet behind it all, when we do take that path, there's always something in it that we discover about ourselves. And so this is where Christy and I are going to go today, in the conversation about the energy pattern of the mystic and what happens, because usually it is life that initiates us. And it usually is a crisis. So Christy, I'm just going to open that up and say, I'm almost certain I know where this conversation is going to go, but you never know. You might take me somewhere else too. So
we'll see where spirit leads us.
That's right. That's right. So my question to you would be, in what ways do you believe that life was preparing you for the life of a mystic? Like not just the mystic that goes within, but the one that takes the message out into the world and serves and helps other people remember.
Yeah, so I would say that this is probably more of a path that found me than it was me seeking it. Right from the time of my birth was that moment of that first separation that I experienced. And my birth mother gave me up for adoption. And so I knew that immediate sort of separation and sort of what almost as like dominoes falling, it almost felt like through my whole life was sort of like that journey back to source again, back to spirit, to God, to, whatever name, you give it. And from that separation, I ended up being in a very loving, childhood home. But of course, those things come with you can't always be protected from everything that you encounter on the path, right? And so I experienced early childhood sexual trauma. I experienced open heart surgery when I was 6. I experienced teenage pregnancy and the subsequent loss of my son, Gabriel, and then the loss of my mother, and then the loss of my marriage. I was divorced shortly after my mom passed away. And so when I first started coming into the path that I'm in now, my path was more about healing so many of those experiences that I'd been through. And I found myself in a place where I was pretty angry with God, right? I'd sort of experienced all of these things. And one of the important pieces that sort of pulled me through that was, despite that anger with God, was that I always had this innate faith inside of myself. I didn't really know what the name of that was or why I had that, but it was just this internal kind of life force inside of me, and this draw to knowing that there was something bigger and greater than myself, and finding my way sort of back to that path, because I always believed that it was there. And so when I started this journey, it was really more about finding that healing and that connection for myself. And I really didn't see myself as being a healer, for other people, right? Because I thought, I'm so damaged myself. Like, how can I possibly help anybody else if I'm in the state that I am? And of course, over time, I've learned a lot about the wounded healer, right? And oftentimes that's one of the most powerful healing paths, right? Because you're able to have that compassion and that resonance and that understanding for so many of life's trials that so many people go through. So, at that point in time, it was, I have been in an energy medicine course for the last almost 11 years. And I would say that my first 6 years of that path were completely for my own healing. And it was sort of like, hiding in the back of the class, because I just was really there, and I wasn't going to be one of those ones that was going to be, flapping their hands around and moving energy. I had no idea what I was doing, until one day my teacher just kind of tapped me on the shoulder and she said, "Christy, where have you been hiding?" And I was like, oh no, she saw me, And so, in the last 5 or 6 years, I've sort of been trying to embrace that role as healer. And when I go back even further, I think that there was an innate part of myself that even as a child knew that I was a healer. I knew when I was at age 5 that I wanted to be a nurse. And probably in my mind, I equated that nurse with that healing, right? So yeah, so it's, as these paths unfold, it's just interesting to see where spirit takes us. It's unexpected.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of it too, right? So through the initiation path, the hero's journey, in a sense, that life sort of initiates us all at some point in time.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is letting go about what we think, the way that we think it's supposed to show, life is supposed to treat us, and things that are supposed to happen. And when we let go, spirit can enter and can guide us. So yeah, it's funny listening to you talk though about the, how you were starting to connect with the energy, but you didn't really want to be seen and doing the woo-woo stuff and all that. And I chuckle because the reason I know Christy through life is through the Deborah King Center too, because I did some training myself. But when we did it, it was during COVID. And so Christy and I never were really in groups together. We didn't get to know each other really well, but there was always something about your energy that I was so drawn to. And then I remember I had said something during one of the group calls about, how I felt like I was being guided to help people prepare to transition, not knowing that COVID was part of that transition, right? And transitioning now, I understand that doesn't necessarily mean end of life. It means transitioning into our spiritual soul form and remembering who we really are. And so, yeah, sometimes it for viewers that are, when we're really in our mind, It's hard to get to that place where we really allow that to guide us. And it does seem different. And so for anybody that is sort of curious and wondering and stuff like that, really is opening up to what's not known.
Exactly.
And it really is mystical and magical.
It
and
is.
Inspiring. It's just like, wow. And somehow the tragic things seem so much easier to cope with, don't they?
Yeah, definitely, you know, it helps kind of pull you through that, right? And I always say to like anybody on this journey that it's really not for the faint of heart. I have lots of family members who even will say to me, you know, why are you going through this? Why are you going through, why are you digging up all of those things? Why are you? And I would say it's nothing that I'm digging up. It's all of these traumas and these events and these emotions that got stuck in my energy field, right? And they start to manifest themselves as physical. And I think that's one of the really beautiful things about energy work is that we don't necessarily need to know what's coming up, or all we need to know is that feeling and that ability to be able to release that and to surrender that. And so, you know, to be able to find the surrender in the midst of that chaos is such a beautiful gift that spirit gives to us. And it helps propel us through those really difficult times, and to be able to lean into that faith and into whatever that practice is, whether that's prayer or meditation or counseling, or, you know, there's so many different modalities of healing. But that surrender is kind of that big piece. And so being on this path, it's a difficult journey. It's not all rainbows and unicorns and everything light and fluffy, right? We're really taking ourselves to that deepest and darkest, you know, corners of our soul, and we're seeking, I mean, that darkness is seeking the light, right? So that transmutation and that transformation and that transition that we make to our spirit selves, and sort of letting go of some of those personality sort of issues that we encounter along the way, right? So it's a hard journey. It's a really, really hard journey. So anybody who says it's just love and light is, you know, I won't finish that sentence.
And that's the truth too, right? It is very long, but there's something about it though that I don't know if you will agree, but for me, even though there's been many difficult moments, and even you and I had to reschedule because something came up, some family crisis that all of a sudden just had me like knocked me out, you know, and it's like, I can't do this. But there's something within that knows, yes, you can. Yes, you can. You can get back to that place. It still hurts. There's still the struggle, the pain, and, you know, but the suffering doesn't have to last. You know, we can remember. And so that's part of what's so beautiful about this. Exactly. And that the energy too, when we understand that, although, you know, like it's more than just energy, like we could talk about it like it's energy, subtle energy, and it's powerful energy, but it's so much more.
It is.
It's impersonal, yet it's very personal too.
Yeah.
So it's this feeling of never being alone too, once you connect with it, and it's never not part of us, never not part of us. And it's as simple as breathing and connecting and going into this sacred space in our heart and remembering. So yeah. You added a few things that weren't in your YouTube video today that I didn't realize that you had been adopted and that you had been sexually molested too. I had no idea. So yeah, you definitely did have a very difficult life. And then you were only, how old were you when you lost your son? You were like 20, 21?
22. Yeah.
22. Yeah. Well, still that return.
Yeah. I always say I was a baby when I had him, and I was still a baby when I lost him. And I think that was a big part of sort of the struggle within my marriage, right? Is we hadn't really become these fully realized adults yet. Right. And so you throw in enormous grief. And, you know, it was kind of like that valley that sort of formed between you, because you don't have those skills to be able to cope, right? Let alone cope together, right? And so
Right.
people will often say, well, what happened in your marriage? Was there? And I'm like, no, actually lots of mutual love and respect, and very amicably separated, right? Because I could never have gone through that experience with somebody and not have full compassion in my heart because they took a different journey than I did, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
and that's what all of those hardships have taught me is that that compassion for other people, and that ability to hold space for them in their own journey, even if it doesn't necessarily run parallel to what mine is, right?
Exactly. Very well said. And it's not even compassion for just others. It's also holding deep compassion for ourselves as we take this journey. And
Very
we forget and we
we do.
splat. I train with Dr. Sue too, and she always calls it splatting. And literally, that's what it feels like. It's like, oh my goodness, I just forgot again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And reminders do we need, right? And I have a couple of incidences that kind of come to mind, as far as sort of feeling that connection again, right? Or that reconnection. And so we sort of go along through our lives and we kind of know that we have this connection, but sort of the further that we are from ourselves and from our essence, the more that we forget that we have this connection and that it's always available to us. And there's two incidences specifically that I can remember in the last, and probably getting on about 10 years ago, sort of when I was in that peak anger phase that I had with spirit. And one of them happened actually at one of my first energy healing workshops. And I had decided to go get an Ayurvedic, like a hot oil treatment where they pour hot oil over your third eye. And I didn't really know what to expect with that. And I had just recently separated from my husband, and, finances were a concern, but I was like, this feels like something that I just need to do. And I listened to that voice and I spent that money and I went and had that treatment. And it was during that treatment that I literally met God. And so as the hot oil started to pour over my third eye, I could just feel myself just kind of just sinking and sinking and sinking into the bed and expanding, and just like my whole energy field just kind of filling this entire room. And all of a sudden, I just felt this presence, and I'll say him because I don't really know how else to explain it, but I heard or felt, I don't even know how to say it, was this voice, and it was God. And I said to him, like, I thought that you'd forgotten about me. And I felt his answer, and it was, my child, how could you possibly have thought that I would forget about you? And it was that moment of sort of just reconnection, and that feeling of sort of peace and of grief both came up in me, because I had forgotten that connection existed for me. And in all of my own trauma, I had separated myself from it. Spirit had never separated themselves from me. It was
Exactly.
me,
Exactly. We're never not with that benevolent, loving energy.
Exactly.
That is grace.
Exactly.
That is love.
And oftentimes it's sort of like at that peak of our frustration, right?
Mm-hmm.
A couple
Absolutely.
years later, again, I had another enormous reminder where I hadn't gone to church in quite some time, and it was Good Friday, and my dad had asked me to go to attend a service with him for Good Friday. And kind of grudgingly, I agreed, and we got into the church and we were late. So we got separated again. And speaking of separation, right, it was just kind of stacked on top. And I was so angry just sitting there in the church feeling by myself. I wasn't even sitting in a pew with people. I was sitting in a separate chair. All I felt was just separation, just all around me. And the priest was going through his sermon, and all of a sudden, like, I just kind of zoned him out, and yet the word surrender just broke through that he said, and I started just meditating on that word, and I was like, surrender. And I was like, why is that so difficult for me to do? Like, why do I resist? Why? I know everything that's available to me, and yet I still forget. And in that moment, I just kind of felt just that anger start to just dissipate and just kind of vibrate out of my field. and tears just started streaming down my face. And behind me, it's kind of like one of those bi-level churches where the choir was up above. And from behind me, I hear the words, "Be still and know that I am." And it was just this moment of just that complete surrender into spirit again, and just that feeling of being home, right?
Right.
But I forget so often that that's who I am. That's where I'm from. It's where I belong, and it's where I'm going back to. It's our whole journey here.
For sure. And that's even brings me to the sacred piece too, with you offering your support to people who are about to transition, and you having, because even you shared in your YouTube story about how your mother, when you went to bathe her or whatever, and said, "Okay, boys got to get out of here," or whatever. And because she was connecting to her brothers that had already passed. And so from that moment on, you knew that there was more to life than just the physical body that we express ourselves through right now. And so that brought you something, and life has been leading you even ever since then, as having that interest. So even when you wanted to quit nursing, life said, no, because you've got a very special role to play. And not everybody wants that role. In fact, so many people are uncomfortable with even the topic of death. You're bringing the sacred back. And for that, Christy, I honor you.
Thank you.
Very much. And I know that the viewers that are listening that have lost a family member, are maybe going through their own struggle with illness or whatever, are going to be riveted by, some of that. So do you want to go explore that a little bit with me?
Yeah. So, I really find that the end of life journey is one of the most or the most sacred journey that any of us take. And I think that part of my role in that feels like it's kind of like when we look at our soul like a garden, and we have all of these flowers and all of these things. And then there's these kind of like weeds that sort of found their way to kind of sprout up. And what I feel like part of my role in aiding that transition is helping with some of those weeds and removing some of those things that were never us and were never meant to be there, and to sort of help bring that spirit or that soul to that place where of that transmutation, where they can transition with that peace. And I think I shared with you before that I never really thought that this was something that was going to be part of my path. And I really did want out of nursing. And I started to notice more and more that I was being called to go to more and more of my colleagues' patients. And it was always within those last few hours of their passing. And I knew when I got there, and oftentimes the families were unaware that the time was really drawing close for them. And, it's a very ginger topic to sort of, you have to be so delicate about it. Especially families are really not aware of what's going on. And so there's been a lot of times where I've had those conversations where I'm preparing them, saying, I could be wrong, but I sense that, in the morning, they may not be here, or, that we're sort of observing those signs of the end of life where, now's the time that they just need you to just surround them and to just support them and be with them and just hold that sacred space for them. And that's such an important conversation to have, because I think in that moment of death, it can bring about that sense of anxiety and that panic, particularly for the loved ones, right? We're not really taught the art of just holding space while people make that transition. And we feel like we have to do something. Right. But really, all we're meant is just to be there and to help be that midwife for them to cross over to that other side and to hold that support for their physical being and for that spiritual being.
Right. And thankfully that is changing. There is more awareness, but we're still really very much in the mindset that the topic. In fact, this reminds me of when I did my Reiki, and I had to do the practicum. And the women that I was serving were all women that had been diagnosed with cancer. And there was one in particular that sticks in my mind because she had a lot of trauma. Nobody would talk to her. She was young, and nobody would even let her share her fears about leaving, maybe transitioning and leaving her two young daughters. And nobody even wanted to entertain that, because if we allow that in, then that might happen to you. So if we just avoid that topic, that won't happen. And yet she kept that was repressed in her. And so as we were doing the energy work, trauma was being lifted and she was able to finally let that go. But she missed that experience of having somebody hold sacred space.
Yeah. And I think that that's something in, particularly in the medical field, right, where there's not that space for those things because there's busyness, there's medications, there's schedules, there's doctor's appointments, there's, blood work, there's all of these things that we sort of forget the human,
right,
that we're dealing with. And so part of, my special interest in palliative care is really being able to step back and being able to look at that person holistically and from a spiritual perspective, to say, what do you need outside of these medical things in addition to how do we, marry the spiritual and the medical together for you? And sometimes people don't have that, they're not connected spiritually, or they don't feel like they are, right? So it's different conversations with different families and with different family members and with different patients. So it's a pretty dynamic challenge sometimes, right? And everybody's always in a different place along that journey. So it's it's so sacred to me to be able to be part of that end of life journey. And I really believe that if you don't have, a nurse or a medical professional who's invested in that part of the journey, for me, that's just such an integral part of it.
Yes. And you wear that so well, because there's a question with the last Sophie that I interviewed, we were talking about Carolyn Mace's timeline of events. And so it makes me think of you right now instantly, is how you lost your son. He was so young. Well, first of all, you were adopted, and so you never even knew your birth mother or birth father. So that always felt like separate, and always that longing. And then with the sexual abuse, and then your son, losing your son, and that would be devastating because it was a tragic accident. And then your mother. So all of life has been preparing you. So spirit has had this, you had this in mind all along. Yeah. Your soul has planned this, and it's so sacred and so beautiful, especially right now. There's something about even how we're transitioning, there's so much change going on right now, right? And a lot of people are recognizing that, whether we're leaving the planet or not.
Yeah.
There's parts of us that are literally dying away anyway. And you help people with that too, is help remember our inner light and just the truth. That too is sacred. That's the thing about this work, especially when you connect with energy, is you realize life is sacred. There's nothing, there is no, it just is. Every experience is a sacred experience, whether it feels good or it doesn't.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's still serving something. So I rambled a bit, but
no,
your timeline though has been preparing you, would you not say?
Oh, for sure. That's why I say this path found me. It wasn't particularly, and probably as a soul, I chose that coming in.
I believe you did.
I always say it's that moment before coming down to earth, it's I was shown this checklist of all these things that I could go through. And I was just this overachiever that said, you know what, I'll just take one of everything.
Sign me up for it all.
And all before I'm 30, let's get it over with. Knock on wood, I hope it's done.
But I don't think it is, but you're going to be in a different place.
Exactly. And that ability to, to move through those things. Right. And I think at the end of the day, it's all about remembering our divine union and, you know, it's, I don't know, it's such a beautiful journey. And there's nothing that I would have done differently or that I wouldn't go back and do again, because to find, you know, that surrender and that peace and that faith that I have because of the things that I've been through, those major life lessons for me and spiritual lessons for me. And so, you know, I'm so grateful and, you know, really embrace life with an open heart because of those experiences. And it's, yeah, it probably sounds strange to say I would do it all over again, but
You know, from a deeper level, to me, it doesn't. But to a lot of people that we're living very much in the personality that's attached to outcomes and to people, to
Yeah.
things, it would seem like, what are you talking about?
Yes.
But for you to evolve and to grow and to discover Christy, like the soul, the essence of you and these beautiful qualities that you get to go and share with others, could never have happened any other way. So all of my questions, like I have all these questions, and yet you've been just like, you're channeled right in, and you're already answering them without me even asking you them, because one of them would be like, can you explain some of the ways the divine expresses through you? But I think you've already answered that. But how do you even know you're connected? What does that feel like? Can you explain that?
That's a little bit of a more difficult one to explain. I feel like there's sort of like different kind of like somatic feelings that I might get in my body. And I would say, like, when I'm feeling in that really divine communion state, there's, for me, it's often a feeling of just complete open-heartedness. And oftentimes for me, it's tears, because being in the presence of that unconditional love, it feels overwhelming. It's not what we're used to, you know, here in this 3D world. And it feels amazing to be bathed in that light and in that love. And so for me, it always brings emotion. You know, when I'm working, you know, with other people, and, you know, we're going through those connections, there's lots of different kind of like body sensations that I might get, you know, within my own body, that sort of alerts me to, well, this might be the emotion that, you know, that they're struggling with, that maybe is stuck there, or this sort of traumatic event. And I've sort of like, through my experience of the last, you know, 10 years, is sort of like making a Rolodex in my mind of, oh, okay, when this happens, when I feel sick to my stomach, you know, or I feel that sort of clutch in my second chakra, oh, we might be dealing with something that's maybe sexual abuse. And because we can feel that sort of resonance in whoever our subject is, right, that we're helping, that we're being that conduit for healing, you know, our bodies are these kind of incredible sensors for those things. So it's really tuning into your body. And I think that the closer that we are to that space of that unconditional love and that divine union, you know, our body is this amazing sensor, which is ultimately what helps us heal.
Absolutely. And I so agree, because I read that in your bio too. And totally 100% agree. But our body, and each one of us, it will, like, as the soul gets to express more and more through us as we awaken to that part of us, it uses the body to communicate to us. So it's not the mind that it doesn't use. I mean, it does not use the mind. It's the body. And even the heart, you know, the deeper feelings and the resonance and stuff like that. But I don't know about you, but the chills that you get all over when you know the truth, when it's resonating with you. And, you know, even some of these symptoms of even people, because as we evolve and as we remember, and you being a nurse and everything, sometimes going to a doctor, they're not going to know that you're actually experiencing what is known as maybe ascension symptoms, or whatever it is that you want to call it, where we're letting go of the material, the physical part of us, and becoming more and more of our spiritual form. And there literally are many symptoms that we go through.
Yeah.
And, that we could just think, wow, what's going on? And it could almost be fearful, but really it's just it's a letting go and surrendering to.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, Christy, another question that I have for you, because again, your message is so beautiful, and I want to really make sure that people are able to tap into that and feel that from you. So if I was to say to you, what's your legacy that you want to leave behind and your mission here? What do you think that is?
I think that it's really helping other people connect to their own inner light. I think that really at the end of the day, that's sort of like our core essence, and that divine union, and to be able to help people find themselves and to find who they really are and what they really are, and to foster that connection, to help them really, like, with that transmutation of those energies and of those feelings, and to be able to know that we can live from that place of compassion and of love is really sort of my goal in life, is to help people. That's really at the end of the day, is to help them feel that connection, feel that healing, and to be able to live that divine union. I think we'd see a much different world if we were all able to come from that space instead of from, the traumatized, sort of fearful place that we all have within us, right? So
I
would
totally
like to make this world a better place. So that's really an ultimate goal.
Well, you're already doing it, by the way. I mean, you're so doing it. And so, but you did say something that Dr. Gabor Mate always says, is that trauma is a separation from our true self.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what causes us the most pain and suffering, is when we are not living in alignment with our truth.
Yeah.
And we know it. And so there's this resistance between the head and the heart.
Mm-hmm.
And once we understand that it's really moving from the head, the thoughts, to allowing ourselves to drop into our body and to be led by our heart, that's when life changes. And lots of times, though, for the viewers, though, it takes a lot of stuff to happen. And if we were not filming this, I would say, as the SHIT thing hits the fan,
Yes.
and it feels really real. And it is real.
It's all valid, right?
Yeah. But if you allow yourself to drop into it, there's something there that's supporting you and that is very loving, and that will guide you through the process. And you don't need to know the end at the beginning, just taking the steps.
And I think that brings the next really important part, is really being able to just stay in that present moment. I think that, there's a lot of fear when we're looking from the past, and there's anxiety sort of when we're looking into the future, right? And I think that we have that peace when we're able to stay in that present moment instead of coming from those other places. And easier said than done, for sure.
Oh, definitely.
But life is much more peaceful when we're able to just be present now.
Yeah. And it really is a journey. But you're right, it's not always the easiest journey, but there is something that comforts as you go through it. Once you know that there is this beautiful, benevolent energy that I love to call grace, or the divine or spirit that's always there for us.
Yeah.
And so is there one thing, though, that you could say that gets you there very quickly? Like for me, it's breath. It's just becoming very present and aware in the moment. I'm right here. I'm looking, I'm looking at the animals. I'm paying attention to nature. I'm paying attention to my breath. It's even maybe touching my heart or my sacred heart. And it's like, boom, there it is.
There I am.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's so beautiful. And so as our session comes to an end, is there anything that you want to share with the viewers? Let them know a little bit more about you. And again, I will post your website, I will post your bio, and I will even post the link for your YouTube video. But is there anything, like, I would just like to open this up to you and say anything that I haven't said that you would like to the opportunity?
I think that we covered a lot of ground in a short period of time. And I think that it's really important, for anybody who may be struggling, and I'll maybe just bring that kind of around to the beginning of our conversation, just mentioning that, holidays can be a really difficult time for people, especially when they're struggling with grief. And, you mentioned you lost your dad, just a few days before Christmas, and my son also passed away at the beginning of December. And so Christmas has always been, I'll say, a very sacred time for me. Even as a kid, there was sort of that mysterious sort of wonder and that joy that the season brought to me, whether that was through the lights, the candles, the snow sparkling, all of those sort of elements that just made it feel so magical. And after I lost Gabriel, and after I lost my mom, there was sort of this feeling of this loss of tradition, and it's sort of a bittersweet feeling on so many of these holidays, because as grateful as you are for your own family being there, it's really difficult to know that you're missing part of yourself or part of your family. And so I just wanted to kind of acknowledge anybody who might be feeling, that particular grief at this time of year, and just to know, that you're not alone. And please, if there's anybody that you can reach out to, I think that people often think, oh, that happened a year ago or 2 years ago or 10 years ago, and I think that people who suffer from grief, they sort of suffer from that feeling of separation, right? And so sometimes it needs us to reach out to somebody and just say, you know what, I'm really struggling, and just being like open and vulnerable, and allowing others into that grief space to be able to share it and not to hold it, completely for yourself, and to find a way that helps you to honor the loved one that you're missing. There was, for many, many years, this is actually the first year since Gabriel died, and it's been 20 years now, that I always had a wreath that had candles, and each candle held, a certain intention, whether that was about grief, about love, about, and I would light those candles every single day, for that month, basically before Christmas. And it was my way of sort of honoring. I used to have a picture of him in the center of it, and sort of over years that evolved. And so maybe there's finding something that brings you comfort and that connection as well to that loved one. So I just wanted to just broach that as well, and just know that, for everybody who's experiencing that loss, my heart, my compassion are with all of you, and just know that you're not alone. That's really, at the end of the day, you're not alone.
That's so beautiful, Christy. Thank you for sharing that. That's a beautiful, sacred way of keeping your little Gabriella back in your life, connecting always. And that is funny too, because, well, it's not funny, but that's how quickly we can connect with our loved ones. It's feeling that vibration. And so, I didn't mean to open this up to another conversation, but I will often feel my dad's energy in me. And so the laughter of my father comes through me. It's not separate from me. He is in me. And, the other day, literally just before my alarm went off, I woke up to an internal song, music playing, saying that I'm watching over you. And I was just, that's my dad. And it was as clear as something playing on the exterior, but it was interior, woke me up and saying that he was right there. Exactly. And so, it's a vibrational thing. So feeling that their energy, and it's literally, they're there, they're inside of you. You can feel them.
Yeah, they're always available.
Yeah. And that's the beautiful thing about understanding energy work and tapping into the subtle, even though it's subtle, it's very beautiful, powerful energy. Yeah. So I thank you so very much for this time. I literally could sit here and talk to you forever.
I know, I could too.
But I'm pretty sure the people that watch don't want to, but I hope that you will accept my invitation again to come back and join
Of
me
course.
sometime in the
Yeah.
future.
You
And we can
bet.
continue this conversation, because I know there are so many beautiful souls out there right now that are struggling, and you do have a powerful message,
Thank you.
and we honor you.
Thank you so much. And I honor you, and thank you for having me. And,
Yeah.
blessed holiday to you.
And to you too, and blessed holiday to the viewers. And, I send you so much love, peace, and blessings.
Thank you so much.
Namaste, beautiful one. Beautiful ones, I should say, to all of you. Thank you for watching. Merry
Take
Christmas.
care.